Cerignotta. We'll say that in the Italian way. Is Madalena here? How'd I do? I should.
It's rarely pronounced correctly. It's Cerignotta. That was pretty close.
We know the feeling around here, trust me. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. I want to thank you for your time. This is very generous of you to give everybody 10 minutes to speak, and for the regular time that you put into doing this. I just want to acknowledge that. I'm very grateful for that. I am here tonight because of the mask mandates and my concerns about their effects on my children. I have 3 school-aged children. I'm also a public school teacher, not in the district, but nearby at South Kingstown. And I have many concerns. I spent this academic year reaching out to DOH and the governor's office on an extremely regular basis. I found them to be completely unresponsive. One of the things that concerned me most was the physiological effects on my children's body from masking, from the dead airspace with the CO2. I couldn't quite understand how anybody could say that that wouldn't reduce blood oxygen saturation when we're clearly breathing in some of our own exhale every time we breathe. That's just common sense. So when I couldn't get an answer from DOH, first I bought an oximeter and I just measured it myself for my children. And it very, very clearly reduced from masking. So eventually, and I'm sorry, I know the word APRA is supercharged right now. I did this before it was a charged word. I submitted an APRA request to RIDE, to DOH, and to the governor's office asking for the safety data that it's okay to force a child to wear a mask without a break for 7 hours during a school day. And RIDE immediately responded to me telling me that they had absolutely no safety data whatsoever. And I have that in writing, and they confirmed that for me. And everybody pointed their fingers to DOH. So I went to DOH. They did respond to me, and they shocked me with their response. They provided me with one study, an Italian study, in which it included 47 children total. That's the entire basis for their safety data, their preponderance of evidence that this is okay. And those children wore a mask for 30 minutes. And even more alarmingly, after only 12 minutes of walking, there was a significant increase in their respiratory rate and their heart rate as well, which indicates stress to the body. So, yeah, and we made our children do sports and gym in a mask all year. And my gut knew from the start that I should not be subjecting my children to this, and I simply cannot do so again, especially with such an egregious lack of data. It prompted me to do more digging. What I found was that there's quite a large body of scientific evidence that indicates that mask use, especially prolonged mask use, is injurious to the human body in many ways, particularly immune function and neurological function and cognitive function, which is exactly the opposite of what we want to be doing to healthy children. This is particularly shocking in light of the fact that regardless of any variant of COVID that exists right now, up until this date, not one child died of COVID in Rhode Island during this entire pandemic from beginning to end as of today. And that's just simply a fact. That's data. That came directly from DOH. So they may say that our children need this for their safety, but our children are safe. I'm not quite sure what exactly we're protecting them from, what we're keeping them safe from. Now, Germany conducted a very large nationwide database of mask use in children this year, this entire academic year. It included nearly 26,000 children. It was 25,900 something, very large database. They found that 68% of children had impairments from mask use. That's over 2/3 of our kids. And I would like to read what those impairments are. Those impairments included irritability, headache, which is an indication of lowered blood oxygen levels, difficulty concentrating, which again is the opposite of what we want to be doing to our kids, less happiness, which breaks my heart just thinking about my 3 very, very young children, and everybody's reluctance to go to school, which was absolutely our experience, malaise, impaired learning, drowsiness, and fatigue. DOH is being reckless with our kids. And they're holding up, in comparison to this study of 26,000 children, this very large database, one study in which 47 children were included, and they wore a mask for 30 minutes. This database, this German database, was for 270 minutes, which is about a school day. So this is much more accurate as to what our children actually experienced. There was also a recently published meta-analysis that corroborates all of this, and if nothing else, indicates that we simply don't have evidence of what we are doing to our kids. There are many parents who are concerned that the risks of what we are doing far outweigh any potential benefits, especially when children are not getting and not spreading COVID. We have a great deal of medical literature at this point that indicates that it is not being transmitted in schools because children are barely getting COVID and barely spreading COVID to one another and to adults. And at this point, we cannot continue to drop this burden on our children. Vulnerable adults have choices now. They can wear a mask. They can get a vaccine, they can stay out of certain high-risk situations, but we cannot continue to impose this on healthy young children. And I haven't even addressed anything but the physical implications. There's the social and emotional implications of not reading faces, of being told that they're not a high enough priority to unmask them because they might make somebody else sick. We've told them they don't matter enough. There's also the educational implications. I spoke with another mother who works in North Kingstown. She's a first grade teacher who told me that her students aren't learning and spelling new words correctly because they can't see her mouth. They can't hear her correctly. So they're missaying the words when they learn them. And then when they go to write them, they're misspelling the words because they've been mispronouncing the words. And the teacher can't even tell. So it's this self-perpetuating negative impact on their education. There are so many levels of this and our kids are the ones being impacted negatively. As a mom, I just can't subject my kids to this again. I wanted to let you know that as of yesterday, Exeter, West Greenwich, and Boroughville school committees have both decided that they're going to make masking optional for their families, which really is the only way to proceed at this point. We have been excluded from the process. As a parent, I have lost the right to say what happens to my kids in school. I was never asked how I felt about it. My children were never asked. I am not even part of this process at this point. It has been usurped from me by an outside agency with absolutely no personal investment in my children's well-being. I'm the one that lives with the choices of any medical choice for my child. I live with the good choices and I live with the bad choices, and I'm going to be the one that deals with all of the fallout if this is bad for my kids. And yet some outside agency is making arbitrary guidelines that hurt my children, not responding to any parental concerns. We are getting a generic response across the board that looks the same for all of us, and they don't have any safety data to support this. There are some unanswered questions that DOH must address. And if the school committee decides to take on mask mandates, they're going to be taking on the liability that RIDO is passing off to you. Because at this point, they're no longer enforcing it in order to allow you to stay open. They're allowing you to make that choice. And if you choose to enforce a mask mandate, what about the equity issues of children who can't do it? Children who've suffered long this year, children who've chosen virtual because of the mask. I've had students who did not go to school because of the mask mandates and not because of fear of COVID, because of the prison-like atmosphere that we were working in. I would have to brace myself every morning before walking into the school building to have to breathe in my own carbon dioxide for hours, to try to project my voice across a room, to try to be in some way peppy for these students, dreading. There were days I just couldn't face it and had to take a day off, a mental health day. And every day I had to go to school knowing that I was doing it to my children as well. And I'm asking you to please stand up for our kids. And as you're considering what school is going to look like in the fall, please consider that nobody, not one person, has assessed even one child for their blood oxygen levels in terms of any government agency in Rhode Island. They have not done so. And I know this because I asked, and they didn't give me any information about any assessment of a child's blood oxygen levels. They gave me one study. They have not evaluated its impact on their education on their social and emotional well-being, we have suicide rates that are skyrocketing. And the legal liability is going to eventually fall on the school district and not the Department of Health. And I'm asking you to stand up and be our heroes and prioritize children, because just as a hospital prioritizes the infirm in their decision-making and not society as a whole, and a nursing home or retirement center will prioritize the elderly and not society as a whole, schools prioritize children. They should be our first priority. Thank you for your time. I
Thank
realize
you.
I've used all my time. Thank you.
Next.